It's episode 34 of Escape the Rat Race Radio. Let's do this.
What happens is when you become an entrepreneur, there's no going back. If you've worked for yourself and then you go into a job, you'll be a way better employee and a way more valuable employee than anybody else, because you don't sit there and go like, well, what am I supposed to do next? And, what's on the agenda? You set the agenda and you go, right, okay, how can I get a sale today? Or what's the one thing that's really going to make the biggest impact? And you go do that. There is actually a technique to creating something that has zero competition and makes you instantly number one in your field.
Greetings, go-getters, and welcome to another episode of Escape the Rat Race Radio. My name's Christian Rodwell, and this week I am very pleased to welcome author of the best-selling books Screw Work, Break Free and Screw Work, Let's Play, Mr. John Williams. Now, John and I had the pleasure of hanging out last summer in Lisbon for a few weeks as we were both working and living remotely on our businesses out there. And throughout John's wildly varied career, he has been an employee, a freelancer, a consultant on contract, and he is now the founder and director of the Ideas Lab. Now, after John's first book was released, it spurred the creation of programs such as the Screw Work 30-Day Challenge, with hundreds of people around the world making an idea happen in 30 days. Now, the new ideas and techniques in the 30-Day Challenge have had a profound impact on those participants, with many sharing stories afterwards of life-changing experiences. Now, when you include all of the live events, masterminds and mentorship programs and consulting that John has done, now several thousand people have road tested these strategies laid out by John in Screw Work, Break Free. And in this interview today, John and I discuss how anybody can start a business with zero competition. So I'm sure you are eager to find out exactly how that's done. So let's not waste any time and let's head over to my conversation with John Williams. Welcome to Escape the Rat Race Radio, John. How are you today?
I'm very good, Christian. Thank you for inviting me.
Good. And whereabouts in the world are you right now?
I'm in London. This is the Ideas Lab. This is my office. It's a live workspace in Dalston by the canal. And it's a nice sunny day today, which is unusual for January.
Yeah, it is indeed. Now, John, you and I have known each other for a year and a half now, and it's predominantly through the Wealth Dynamics community. Roger Hamilton was a previous guest, episode 17, and we've got a mutual interest and love of Wealth Dynamics. And we hung out in Lisbon last year when we were both over there doing the remote working lifestyle. So it's really great to have you on the show today. And I know that you help many, many people to really build businesses which they love and can be run from pretty much anywhere in the world. So for those people who maybe are not familiar with you so far, John, listening right now, would you mind just giving them a little bit of background as to who you are and what your business is?
Yeah, well, my background originally was in technology. So I basically worked in innovation my entire career. Straight out of college, I studied physics and IT. And people were quite surprised when I say that I used to work in technology strategy, particularly for the creative industries. And then one day I sort of quit, trained as a psychotherapist and coach, got a book deal, and started doing whatever it is I do now, which is running the Ideas Lab. I kind of don't like to be labeled too much. But what I'm well known for in this space now is these books, Screw Work, Let's Play, which came out back in 2010. It kind of defined its genre back there. It's about how to do what you love and get paid for it, and has now been translated into multiple languages. And Screw Work, Break Free, which came out in 2016, and is about how to start a business in 30 days. And so that's kind of my work is a little bit based around the same topics at the Ideas Lab. I help people to find the idea that they love, get it out into the world in the way that really works. And also I've got a particular interest, I think we're going to talk about later, how do you create a business with no competition? Given that every space seems to be crowded right now, there is actually a technique to creating something that has zero competition and makes you instantly number one in your field. And that might be a subject of a future book for me. It's something I work with clients on a program I run called the Pioneer Program.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And I imagine, we're 2018 now, January. 8 years since you kind of released that first book, John. So in terms of the magnitude of the movement of technology and everything that's advanced, and entrepreneurship now becoming, so familiar with millennials and the changes, how do you see the changing landscape for someone who is completely new to business but has some ideas and just wants to really launch and start making money as quickly as possible? Do you think it's got easier now, or do you think the competition has actually made it more difficult?
No, I don't think it's gotten more difficult. I think some areas that you want to be wary about people who teach you courses about how to do one specific thing. So like, here's like the formula of how to, become this kind of, get into this kind of industry. Because the problem with that is then you'll find that you'll get into somewhere where everybody else is also following the same formula. So that can give you the impression that everything's crowded and it's very difficult to start your own business. But in actual fact, if you come out into the marketplace with a set of skills, whether you develop them in your spare time and your hobbies, or whether it's from your work life, and you find a way to solve people's problems with that, it's now so much easier to do that than it was even in 2010 when my book first came out, because back then there weren't the tools that we have now, and they are so cheap. I mean, Facebook is free after all to market yourself personally, and then there are all sorts of tools that you can buy for $10 or $20 a month that do amazing things for you in terms of marketing. So I think it's so much easier than back when, say, my grandfather started a motor body repairers business and had to hire staff and have premises and build paint booths and whatever you call them, that kind of stuff. It's very different.
Yeah, great. And you mentioned there, John, we are going to really dive deep into that topic of how to create a business with zero competition, which I'm sure anyone who's seen the title of this podcast is intrigued as to how one does that. So we'll come on to that shortly, but let's rewind it back a little bit and look at, you said you were working in a successful job, and I'm interested to know, John, really what was it that sparked your entrepreneurial mindset? And can you remember the period of transition where you were realizing, hey, I don't want to have to do the daily commute and be part of this 9-to-5 grind any longer? And what was the process that you went through in terms of educating yourself and maybe doing courses and then deciding that to actually make that jump?
I think that I never quite suited jobs, and I assumed that's what you had to do. I assumed that a job is what you were supposed to do, which is a very odd conclusion to come to, considering my mother worked for a family business. My father owned his own pharmacy shop, and his father did. So, but somehow, despite all that, I think partly my mum had this idea that I should really get a job. So I came out with this idea that jobs are the way to go, and of course, the education system brainwashes us into believing that you should get a job. Because I don't think even now, although I haven't been, I don't have children, so I'm not that closely connected to the education system. But I think even now that you are kind of veered towards a route which means you're going to get a normal job. So I had all of that soaked into me, and yet I never really wanted a job. That paradox was always within me. And so I first started my first solution was try and get interesting jobs. So I worked on software that was used at the BBC to make TV programs, and special effects software that was used by major Hollywood films. I went and worked at Disney in Los Angeles for a while. And I did all sorts of exciting things, but I still wanted to just not have a job at all. So I tried first time, I think, in 1999, and then ended up being tempted into a .com, into a startup, and then ended up at Deloitte. And so the answer to your question is I always wanted to get out. And what happened was, after I'd been at Deloitte for a year, I thought, this really is not me. How on earth did I get into this corporate world? I think I was sold that it was going to be something really exciting. And it just didn't suit me at all. And so I made a move to leave. And at the point I made an agreement to get out of Deloitte after 1 year, I said to myself, I never want a job for the rest of my life. And I've stuck to it ever since. And there were moments when I was starting my business where I thought, this is quite hairy. Maybe I should go and get a job. But I thought, well, by the time I'd written the book and it had, been read all over the world, and it said in it, I never want a job for the rest of my life. I can't get back on it now. That's what you call commitment. There's like people, there's people reading it in Russian and Malay and stuff. I had these out this morning because I was doing a video. And I thought, well, I can't get back on that now, so I've got to stick at it. But that moment that I walked out and I arranged an exit strategy with the company, and I remember walking down this corridor, and it was really quite something. I thought, this is it, I'm out finally. And it's a wonderful moment, I can tell you.
Absolutely. And for some people who have always worked in that corporate environment, you don't realize until you actually leap out and you wake up on that first morning being the boss of you and look around and go, geez, I now need to be the person making the sales calls, yes, making all the decisions, bringing the money in. That can actually be something that you don't really feel prepared for. How did you deal with that in the early days of actually knowing what was important in your business to focus on first?
Well, actually, I write about this, and I talk about it as it's like turning a tanker around 180 degrees. It takes a very long time. Well, it did with me anyway. Some people are naturally entrepreneurial, but for most of us who aren't, it takes a long time. And what I find with clients is they think they're going to come to me and learn some trick of marketing or of choosing the right business idea, which is going to make everything easy. And those things certainly are important. I do help people with that. But actually, the biggest work they've got to do if they haven't run a business before is to think like an entrepreneur. And the way I did it, I think it was back in 99 when I first tried to go, well, I did go freelance. And I did some interesting projects. I was a software developer back then. So I worked on a project for one of the museums. Which one was it? I can't remember. But it was the Science Museum in London. And I worked on this thing that represented sound. I was very into music technology, which is something maybe we share, Christian, and electronic music. And so I helped this company create something that would go in the Science Museum that represented sound and told you about bit rates and things like that. And I did a few projects like that, and then eventually got sucked into this startup. But in the process of trying to sell myself, I had that turning the tanker around process was already happening. So although I went back into a job for a while, for a couple of years, I actually had changed forever. And what happens is when you become an entrepreneur, there's no going back. Even if you've worked for yourself and then you go into a job, you'll be a way better employee and a way more valuable employee than anybody else, because you don't sit there and go like, well, what am I supposed to do next? And what's on the agenda? You set the agenda. And you go, right, okay, how can I get a sale today? Or what's the one thing that's really going to make the biggest impact? And you go do that. And so I became a way more effective person. I mean, other than that, I just read a lot of books. I had coaches, as I'm sure you've talked about, Christian. So all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we've absolutely talked about the importance of mentors in the past. And obviously mentoring is something that you do now with your clients as well, John. It's funny that you talk about that, going back in as an employee after having run your own business. And it reminds me, I was listening to some audio when I was running yesterday, and it was Napoleon Hill and the principles of success. And one of the key principles there was initiative. And it's about doing the things that you're not necessarily asked to do, but you just do them anyway. And I think that really sums up the entrepreneur mindset, is that you're just a go-getter. You just know that things need to get done. And there's another side of that in terms of delegation. Entrepreneurs really need to understand the value of their time and leveraging other people's time and other people's money as well. Yeah. So, John,
there was a moment that's worth explaining, which is, and at some moment you'll probably be tested as an entrepreneur. And tested means you things all go horribly wrong. And am I allowed to swear on this podcast, by the way? I normally do. Right. Okay. So things will turn to shit at some point. And at the end of this period of freelancing, where I had no idea what I was doing, and I was trying to sell myself as something that I was trying to not be a programmer, but I didn't know what I was selling myself as. And that's why it took me 6 months to land this part-time gig that ended up turning into a part-time consultancy gig, ended up turning into a job after a year. And because I kept going, well, I'm not that and I'm not that. And one of the lessons is, you need to sell yourself as something people actually want. But what happened finally is this startup offered me a job and they said, no, you've got to work full time. I said, I only want to work 3 days a week because I want to do other things the rest of the time. And they said, no, you've got to work full time. It's the CEO talking to me. And I said, well, and I was out of money at this point because I'd run out of projects and I was doing not a very good job back then of marketing myself. It's back in the end of the 90s, I think. And he said, well, then no deal. And I helped. And even though I basically thought, how am I going to pay the mortgage this month? I just said, okay, then, well, that's that. And I just stood by it because I felt like I haven't come this far to give up on it now. And then what I did was I wrote, and because I'm quite good, everyone needs to know their medium that they're most powerful in. And some it's speech and some it's writing or whatever it might be. And for me, it's writing. So I wrote an email and I persuaded him, look, if you hire me on Monday morning, I'm going to start using all my contacts in the media industry to sell your technology projects. I will hit the ground running. And I don't know what else I said, but he hired me. And so finally, I was staring down, complete ruin. And he said, okay, then. And often you'll find there comes a moment, and I don't recommend financial recklessness, by the way. I don't think you should take these things lightly. But there will be a test that comes. Almost, some people say it's the universe testing you. How good is your resolve? And at the point you say, no, I'm really sticking to what I care about, whatever happens. And he took me on. And he said, you can work 3 days a week for 6 months. Then you have to go full time and become an employee. And I extended it to a year. Then he made me an employee because it was so tempting. He made me basically CTO of a section of the company, and it was too exciting not to be in the middle of the .com boom.
Yeah, I can imagine. And it's interesting. We talked last week at the Escape the Rat Race meetup about really being clear about what your motivation is, because for some people, they're motivated by the stick, the things they don't like in life. Maybe it's the boss, the commute, the people in the office.
And away from the person.
Yeah, that's right.
That's me, actually, largely. I just don't want to have a job.
Yeah. And I think
that's actually the best reason to be, the primary reason to be an entrepreneur,
Yeah. And it is often that, and sometimes it could be maybe a not very nice situation that is the enough is enough moment that you just say, I cannot do this or do not want to do this any longer. But then you start to realize that actually the real strong motivator becomes the carrot, which is the vision, which is getting clear about actually what do you want. And that, I think, is an important aspect, again, of switching from the employee to the entrepreneur mindset, is really having a cause or a passion to change something, to solve a problem. Do you touch on this when you do your 30-day challenge?
Yeah, I mean, it's at the heart of, that's part of what I was trying to write about in Screw Let's Play, where I was saying a model of entrepreneurship is a bit more like art. It's saying, what do you want to give to the world and what do you have that no one else has? And maybe that's the main driver of your entrepreneurial journey rather than money. Now, I'm a big believer in money and I like money. So I'm all for monetizing stuff in the best way possible. But the choice of project is driven a lot for me and I think for other creative people by expressing themselves and by doing what they feel is most important. So when I was writing Screw Break Free, it took me a long time because I was busy with my business because it was doing so well. And also I was struggling to work out how you write a book, which is about an iterative process, or like a cyclical process of entrepreneurship in one book that's like beginning to end. It's a linear format. And it was driving me bananas. And people were saying, my friends were getting sick of me talking about it. And they're going, well, don't write it then. And then I thought, well, in the end, I thought, if I was going to do one thing, like if I was going to die next year, if I got a year left to live, what would I do? What's the most important thing to do? And actually, it would be write the book. So whatever happens, I'm going to write the damn thing. And actually, in the end, it ended up a cracking book, and it got loads of press coverage right from the off, from the Telegraph and the Guardian and everything. And it's been translated into Chinese this year. And I feel like, that's a good question to ask yourself. It's like the Steve Jobs question. If this is my last day or if this is my last year, what is this what I really want to spend it doing? And I think that has to be factored in alongside the money. And so that there's, at the end of your life, you can say, okay, well, that had some meaning to me. Hi, I'm John Williams, and you're listening to Escape the Rat Race Radio.
Now, for our listeners, John, many of them will be still in full-time employment, maybe searching for that idea, the one that they can really focus on and spend all of their spare time really building. So let's talk about this subject of how to.
Well, actually, I want to do. Okay, but can I just pick fault with that first?
Okay.
Everyone thinks before they start, but what matters is the idea. I would encourage you to read, and if you know anything about books, it's published by Penguin Random House. It's not self-published, so make about 50p if you buy the book. I'm not telling you to read the book because it's going to make me rich, but if you read Screw Up, Break Free, I will disavow you of that idea, because you don't. The idea is not nearly as important. You know this now, Christian. Every entrepreneur knows it's more established. The idea is not that important because you put something out there into the world and then you keep iterating, you keep improving it. So when you're looking for the perfect idea, don't get obsessed. If you read, you can read the first chapter of Screw Up, Break Free. If you just Google Screw Up, Break Free, you can get that for free. So you'll kind of start to understand what I mean. But you were going to ask about the start something with no competition. Was that what you were going for?
Yeah. So for those listening now, they've got the itch. They know that sitting behind that desk is not for them, and they want to build a business, but they're still not quite sure what that pathway is. And I know this is really your area of expertise. You've worked with hundreds and hundreds of people to launch them into their own businesses. So how do you go about creating a business with zero competition, John?
So here's the deal. You want to be the best in the world because the best in the world gets 70 or 80% of the benefit. Like Amazon makes, 10 times its nearest competitor, or probably 100 times. Normally in any industry, the number one will get the vast bulk of the rewards. How do you do that? How do you be the best in the world? Doesn't mean you're the best of any kind. What you have to do is you have to make your world smaller. So how can you make the thing that you're focusing on smaller? So that you can be number one in it. And if you make it small enough, if you choose something really specific, and generally what people do when they start a business is they start far too broad and they say, I will help anyone or I will do anything. And that actually makes you very unappealing. It's kind of like going into the dating world and go, I will date anybody at all. I'm desperate. So that's very unappealing. You won't give any dates if you do that. Whereas if you say very specifically the kind of person you want, and when you see that kind of person, you really connect with them in a very powerful way, that has much better results. So that works in business, and it's about, it's been called category creation. This is what I'm talking about creating something with zero competition. If you can zoom down into an area that's quite small, then what you can do is you can create a whole new category that's very specific. So to give you an example, I had a client on my program that I used to run called the 30-Day Challenge, which my book's based on, Screw Up, Break Free. And her name's Saskia Nelson, and she wanted to get into photography. She's really passionate about photography. Her job had been completely unrelated. She'd lost her job, I think. And she, rather than do what most people do, which is, I'll take a photo of your wedding, and I'll take a photo of your pet, and I'll do, portrait photos, and I'll do business photos. I'll take anything I can. And then they struggle for work forever, and they have to compete on price of everybody else. She said, what I'm really excited about is dating, because she spent a long time on dating sites before she met her partner. And she said, what she noticed is that most people's photos are either A, horrible, and just not flattering at all, or bad, or B, overly produced. So they look like you've been made up in a studio and you're in a sort of, you're doing this funny pose. And she said, well, surely we need to be able to do these photos that are more natural, but still really good. So she set up a business called Hey Saturday. And she said, I am a dating profile photographer. That's it. And she went out there, and because it was a bit quirky, because it was so specific, because she took a stand on her business and was really, really specific about what she was doing, she got loads of press. I mean, she was in every magazine. She ended up taking so many photos that she had to hire people. She's now got 10 photographers under her in Hey Saturday. And she's starting up in New York. She's already got multiple cities in London. You have to go through this application process to become a Hey Saturday photographer. They work under her brand, and she makes money off all those photographers. And that's all because she created a new category, which was dating profile photography. And there are lots of other examples of clients I've worked with who've done that. And you do it by being specific and saying, I'm going to do this one thing really well because my skills match it and my interests match it. So that's really the heart of the idea of the process.
Yeah, no, I love that example, John, and makes me think of another member of the Roger Hamilton community, Traci Keller, the artist, who I'm sure you're familiar with. And
yeah, she's great. I interviewed her for one of my courses. She's fantastic.
Oh, she certainly is. And for anyone listening who's into art, definitely check out Traci Keller online. And she is great at doing paintings of animals. But then she niched down into dogs and made dogs her thing, did a competition on Facebook and actually started doing cushion covers and having a dog of the day competition, and everyone was sending in photos of their dog and she would pick one as a winner, and just really, really niching down into that area. And that absolutely exploded her business and then allowed her to kind of step back out and then focus again on all of the other animal designs as well. So a little bit of a similar example perhaps there as well. So John, that's a great way for someone to start thinking about that. What other tips and ideas can you give someone who is teetering on the edge of entrepreneurship, who really is looking at the next 12 months to be able to start generating an income through an interest, through a passion, and really feel confident that that is going to lead them to an escape route out of their 9 to 5?
Well, first of all, I recommend you start doing it while you've still got a salary. So particularly, there are several, having worked with thousands of people on this, there are several phases to the process of finding a business and starting it and making it work and scaling it. And the first bit is, what business do I want to run? And that requires a bit of it. By the way, you can't do that by sitting and thinking about it. You have to experiment. That's one of the fundamental things I write about a lot. So you have to go out and try things. You cannot sit there and wait for a bolt of lightning. It won't come. It's a really stupid idea. So I just want to, it's really a common misconception. So you experiment and you try stuff out. And that process is quite a long time. That might take you a few months, depending on how urgently you go at it and how much clarity you have at the beginning. You definitely do not want to quit your job and then be doing that part of the process, because now you're trying to do this blue sky thinking and you're living on savings or something. That's not a good idea. So you need to at least have done that process. Ideally, have started, made the choice and started experimenting and worked on the side and done whatever it is you want to do, whether it's building websites or helping people or investing in Bitcoin or whatever it might be. And you get to the point where it's getting a return, and you then you have got more work that you can fit into your spare time. And then at some point you have to make that kind of scary leap into, okay, I trust that I will be able to scale this thing. That's what I recommend you do. You kind of choose something and then run at it with all your might that you've got outside of your job, every bit of spare time you've got on the weekends, to prove that this thing's going to work. And to do that and to experiment with ideas. If you don't know exactly what idea, experiment and try it out. That's how you find out if you enjoy it and whether people think you're any good at it. Yeah,
great advice. And I would add to that the network. Really surround yourself with like-minded people. It makes such a difference because there will be a few bumps along that journey, won't there, John? All entrepreneurs know that it can be a bit of a roller coaster ride in those early years. And you have to be prepared for that and have some resilience to ride through that. So, John, I'm imagining that you have no regrets whatsoever about waving goodbye to that corporate life. What's the best thing for you about being an entrepreneur, would you say?
The best thing? I think it's stuff like somebody says, do you want to have like brunch tomorrow, like in the middle of the day or something? And I just go, yeah, all right. And we go into, like, I live by the canal. It's a really nice area in London. And I go and sit with somebody and have a leisurely brunch and just kind of, chat. And then I get on with my work later because I have, largely I get to do what I want with whom I want, when I want, and where I want. And I've also, like you, ran my business from Lisbon for a few weeks, and also I've been to Bali multiple times, but I was in Bali for 2 months a year ago, and just ran my business as normal from there. And that's that freedom, I think, and also the ability the freedom of self-expression, I think, is probably really up there as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And the response I get back so often when I ask members of the Escape the Rat Race community, what is it that really drives you to escape the rat race and freedom, be it financial freedom, time freedom, freedom of choice, always at the top of the list. So, John, it's been so good speaking with you today. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure everybody listening has too. For anyone that would like to download a copy of your first chapter, connect with you online, where can they go? Give us some URLs and places where you hang out online.
I've got a few websites, but probably the best place to start at the moment is screwworkbreakfree.com. And on there, you can download the resources that go with the book. So you can get the first chapter of the book, and you can get a worksheet for helping you choose your ideas. If you've got a few ideas, there's a particular way of breaking it down that will really help. And there are some other things there's a kind of whole break-free toolkit you can get just by putting your email address in there. And then otherwise, you might want to check out the books on Amazon, Screw It, Let's Play, and Screw It, Break Free. They're pretty much all 5 stars all the way, and have both been bestsellers when they came out. So those might interest you. Have a look and see which one appeals. And I think that's probably as good a place as any. I've got a website for my company, The Ideas Lab, which is theideaslab.org. So that has a good summary of everything that's going on as well. Excellent.
John, thank you so much for being an amazing guest on Escape the Rat Race Radio. Let's schedule brunch soon. Yeah. And I look forward to catching up with you again really soon.
Thanks, Christian. Really appreciate it.
No
Cheers.
Worries. Thanks, John. Well, I really hope that you picked up some useful insights from my conversation with John there as to how you might go about validating those handful of ideas which you have been sitting on for far too long without doing anything about them. Now, John told us that the secret to creating a business with zero competition is to go deep and create your own niche category where you can become the expert and the go-to person, thus making you stand out and have far more chance of gaining referrals and publicity to help your business get off to an explosive start. John also said that he never really did fit in with the 9-to-5 corporate lifestyle, and how once he had decided that he wasn't going to do that any longer, he had an amazing feeling of relief and began his roller coaster ride as an entrepreneur. Now, despite there being a steep learning curve in those first few months and even years sometimes, the freedom that being your own boss can give you is something that means it's almost impossible to ever return back to a normal 9-to-5 again. Well, I really hope you enjoyed today's show. And if you did, then I'd love to ask you for 2 minutes of your time. And what better time than right now? And head into your podcasting app on either iTunes or Google Play and search for Escape the Rat Race Radio and leave me a review to let me know which of my guests you have enjoyed most and who else you'd like for me to invite onto the show. Well, next week, we're back with another Escapees episode where I'll be speaking to another member of the Escape the Rat Race community who has recently successfully quit their job and, just like John, has never looked back since. So until next week, see ya.